All right, ladies and gentlemen, we clearly at this point have just finished the first mouth of our practice. All right, use some of the ability and skills that we use at the eye, especially in making lids. We use our fingers to sort of contour the upper lid and make it match in with the lower. And we've made our first mouth. It's slightly open, a little bit closed. You can see mine from the sides. We have the chin and everything else like that. All our edges smoothed out. We've left a little bit of the crease where it matches up. I'm going to make the second mouth, and we're going to be repeating a lot of those processes. I've already, for the sake of time, done some of the things that you already know how to do. That was take 2 separate balls of quarter-sized clay and mash them out. One into a flat piece, evenly distributed. That piece should be approximately a little bit wider than 2 balls of clay. So you want to think, don't make it super thin. Don't make it super small. If you want to work a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, that's fine too. Taking a second ball of clay, and this one, I've sort of molded it out to a similar piece, but you can see this one is sort of like a half of a circle, or half moon. That'll be my chin part. Again, I'm going to put that together with a little bit of overlap over here, and then I'm going to mush them together. And just like everything that we combine, we want to make sure that we smoothen out the edges so that the seam, and when I say seam, I mean the part where the 2 pieces of clay meet, end up all smoothed out. And again, this whole thing is going to serve as the base from which we work on. And, you know, we're going to need a decent sized base to make this open mouth. Just like before, I marked a little spot where I was going to put the mouth. I don't necessarily need that now because a lot of it's going to get covered. But we could do that in the top portion over here. A little line just to kind of indicate, just to give me an idea of where that's going to be. And one of the other reasons why I do this is because I like to put a little mark here and try to center it on my little base. So, you know, even though everything I'm doing over here is all going to get covered up, this little marking that I do, this is one of the ways I can kind of try to create a middle so I know where I'm working with. And again, you see I've got my top, I've got my rounded off bottom. I'm going to come in a little bit closer now. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to build a chin. All right. So I'm going to get my clay, another ball of clay. I'm going to start mashing it down, pressing it in to my flattened surface. Okay. And what I want to do is I kind of want to make this a little bit round, a little bit more like a football. You can see one side has become pretty flat while the other side has stayed round. And this I'm going to kind of mold and shape to fit in on the bottom of my base. And once again, once I have that on my base, I want to kind of blend it into that part. We don't want to have those seams. They don't look good, but more importantly is when you bake this clay, if you leave a big seam or one of those folds or things like that, that's a place where your clay is liable to break or separate. So by smoothing it out together, you can see like those 2 pieces now slowly become one, and you don't really see where the original piece was attached. That makes this solid, gives it a much better chance for when we do make a piece that takes a lot more time and is a little bit more involved, like the face, make sure that it survives. And I want you, as you're working on these things, part of the things that you're practicing is good craftsmanship. So get into the habit of not leaving any sort of folds, creases, or cracks, or seams where you've blended 2 pieces together. You ultimately want to put this together to the point where I can't tell where one thing's been added or one thing's been subtracted. Now everybody's chin's going to be a little bit different, but you can see I've created something that bumps out over here. Now before I start adding the lower lip, I want to kind of build out on the inside of this a little bit. I'm going to add teeth and a tiny little bit of a tongue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another one of my balls of clay, and this time I'm just going to try to divide this thing in half. So I want 2 relatively equal smaller pieces. You could kind of pinch them however you want and sort of divide one into 2. You could make them really tiny, a little bit smaller than a dime if you have change at home. But what we want to do is we want to take one big piece of clay, and we want to basically divide that little meatball into 2 equal parts. All right, and those 2 equal parts is going to be the start of what we're going to use for our teeth. All right, so we got the 2 right over there. What I'm going to start with first is I'm going to start rolling this little piece of clay out into a little bit of those sausage shapes. I could do it to both of them at the same time. I don't want to roll this out really, really thick. Oh, I'm sorry, not really thick. I want to make this thick. I don't want to make it really long. You can see that first piece that I started to make, it's just about a little bit thicker than, or wider than the quarter. You can see how thick it is over here like this. And it's about a little bit wider than the quarter. Same thing for the other one. Don't make it too long. The longer you make it, the thinner it will be. Now what I want to do is I want to take that little sausage that I've rolled out. You can see how smooth it has, no seams, no little dents or anything else like that. Now I want to kind of flatten that out a little bit. Okay? I don't want to make it much longer. It'll get a little bit longer as I'm flattening it out. I just want to make it a bit wider. And I want to keep it in this sort of rectangular form. Okay. As you can see, it's starting to get a bit wider. Okay, not crazy wide. I put it over here. You can see it's still much smaller than my base. It is maybe like a quarter, a little bit less than 2/4 wide. All right, I'm gonna work on that. This is gonna be part of my top row over here. I want to look at the thickness. It's a little bit thinner than what I've been working with, which is fine, but you can see how even that thickness is all the way through. I'm gonna do the same thing for this bottom one. Okay. Try to keep it equal looking. If you see part of this thing is getting too wide or too thick, try to pinch it so you make everything just about the same. So again, we want to keep it in sort of a long, thin, rectangular type shape. Okay? A little bit thinner than what we've been working with before. And we're all going to get to become dentists today. All right. Well, now we're going to try to have a little fun, and don't go crazy with the toothpick over here. But what we want to do is we want to take that sharp edge of the toothpick, and we want to kind of very lightly sort of press in and kind of divide it down the center. Okay? We're not cutting all the way through, but we're trying to make a little bit of an indent. And I'm going to use that round edge of the toothpick to kind of smoothen that edge out. You can see I'm sort of splitting it there. That's my first little, what's going to be the edge of the tooth. You can see I've kind of used the edge of the toothpick. I'll just run it right down it, made it kind of smooth. I got a little bit on the bottom. I want to kind of use the edge of the toothpick to kind of split that. So I'm going right down the middle. Divided it. Don't worry about the top part. That's going to get covered up by the lips. But what we want is we want to have a nice little separation on the bottom over here. We're going to just make 4 teeth for the top. So what I'll tell you is that we want to divide that half. Divide it into half, but we want to make that middle tooth a little bit bigger. Make that outer tooth a little bit smaller. It's okay. Not everybody's teeth are perfectly symmetrical, so I'll make a little line. I'm going to go ahead and just use the edge of my toothpick to sort of mark that up a little bit. I don't want to cut all the way through these things, but I do want on one side of it on the bottom to sort of continue on that little indent, and that's what's going to separate each tooth from one another. And this is going to be, again, much more involved than our last mouth, but this is the time for us to practice these things. These are the times for us to get used to these things. And we're not going to see a ton of these teeth. A lot of it's going to get covered up. So what we want to do is we want to kind of make sure that the bottom edge of these things look pretty good. Top edge really doesn't matter because it's getting covered up. I made some of my top row little chiclets, I guess. We're going to start working on the bottom row. Going to make them a little smaller on the bottom row. Again, I'm going to drag my toothpick right across the center of it. I'm going to use my toothpick, and again, this is going to probably take you more than one session to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make these bottom teeth a little bit closer together. So where I made 4 with the top piece, I'm going to try to make 6 on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and kind of divide that up into 6 equal parts over here. I'm going to think of the top edge of this. Again, I'm going to use my toothpick kind of do a little separation on them. Again, just a little indent. And these are things that we're not going to be able to sort of mess with and fix later on. So we want to make sure our teeth look pretty good right off the bat. If you want to kind of make them a little jagged or play around with like the overall shape of the edge, realize all you're going to see is this top edge of teeth. All right, this bottom edge is going to get covered up. So I got my top edge and my bottom edge over here. All right, and we're going to be placing them on the face to make them look a little bit open, but we don't want it to look like a flat front over here. We want to bounce this out a little bit. So this is where we're going to take another piece of clay. Again, we're going to take that clay, we're going to kind of pinch that little ball that I made that was about the size of a quarter. We're going to divide it in half again, and we're going to go ahead and start mashing that little piece into a nice little football, and we are going to flatten that out a little bit, just like we did for the chin. This is just, imagine just a smaller version of the chin. It's sort of football shaped. It's flat on one side. All right, so we've made that little flat piece. You can see the shape that I've created in mine. You can see how big it was. And again, this is only half of the clay of a regular size clay ball that we make. This one's going to go right over the mouth that we drew, and we want to try to keep this one in the middle. This is going to kind of serve a little bit as our tongue. It's also going to serve to kind of bump out those teeth so they don't go flat across. And what I'm going to do is, again, as always, smooth out areas. This area down here that I'm working on now is going to get covered up with clay, but I do think this is a good practice for you, especially for the lower lip, to be able to kind of get in there and smoothen that out. You can see the groove of your finger. And what you see right now, as I'm working, is I've created that little bump out. Okay? You can see what it looks like from the side. We got a nice little bump out going on over there. I've got my base. I want to kind of smoothen those areas around, make sure everything is nice and neat, and I'm trying to keep things relatively symmetrical. All right, so now we're going to place our bottom row, and we're going to do like a rough fitting again. So I got my bottom row, and I got my top row. All right, got my little dentures in over there, and you can see how they're sort of bumped out and rounded out. Okay, we don't have to make the mouth really wide open. We're not using that much clay, but we do want to see, okay, we got the teeth out there, sort of filled out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, before I attach those, I'm going to adjust my little bump, which is going to be the tongue here. I'm going to give it a little bit more adjustment, give it a little more space. I think I wanted my top teeth to stick out a little bit more. I'm going to kind of set that up and set that up. Kind of give myself a little bit of a feel. So I've got my top row and I've got my bottom row. I haven't attached anything yet. This is just my rough fitting to see how these things look. And Again, should be a little round this way. Take a look how they are. If you don't like the way they look now, change them. You can see how they're bent up now because of the tongue. And we got the start over there. To put this together, I'm just going to kind of press the lower teeth in a little bit. And I don't want to mess with this edge at all. I really don't want to ruin the little detail work. But don't worry about the bottom edge because that's going to get covered up at some point. Top edge too over here, you want to very carefully just press that one in. You don't want to overly blend this in on the edges here because then we'll lose some of that detail. So the teeth are not going to get pressed into the face too much. You can see I've kind of blended the outside edges of them. I left the top one over there. It should kind of just stick on there right now. All right, and now we're now time for us to start messing around with the lips, and you guys already know how to do that. So, first I'm going to get my little bowl of clay over here. I'm going to work with that and start rolling it out. I'm going to work on my lower lip first. Okay. I'll roll that out. Since I used a full-size ball of clay the size of a quarter, all right, it's going to be pretty big. Okay, so you can see how big I'm rolling this out. You kind of keep that a little thicker. I'm going to see about the thickness that I see over here. You can compare that to the size of the quarter. This will start to be my lower lip. All right, and it's okay if it's a little long. We can always pinch off the extra over here. But what we want to have is a nice full, nice evenly round, sort of long pipe worth of clay. And it's okay that it stays a little bit thicker. If you make it too thin, bowl it back up again and redo it. What we're going to do is now this is a little circle, just like we made the lower lip before. We're going to pinch the bottom edge of this thing. Okay? We want to keep the top edge untouched. That top edge is going to be the lip. The bottom edge is going to blend into the chin. You can see I've kept that top edge nice and round. And that bottom edge I've sort of pinched a little bit. So this thing looks like a teardrop if you look at it from the side. So it's like round and pinched over there. And that's the way it should look through the whole end. This is going to be my lower lip. I want to fit it in. It's got a little bit of a smile going on it. I don't want to show off too much of my lower teeth. You can always adjust this. And I don't want to lose the smoothness and the roundness of that top part. Remember, when I'm putting this in, I just want to blend down here. And this is where you got to use just your fingertips. Try not to mess up the top edge. And this is going to be blended into the chin. And, sometimes it's just about being patient and just going over it a few times. The more you go over it, it will slowly smoothen out. Think about if you were dragging your finger along your own face, around your chin, and feeling the contour, that roundness over there. What would that look like? And you see right now I've almost completed it. I blended that bottom part in while I've still kept the top part of that lower lip round. That's nice and full, and you can see how thick it is. Over to the sides over here, this is where we can kind of start pushing that in and flattening that out. Okay. And for right now, I'm going to leave that extra little bit of clay out there. I'll take another big piece of clay the size of a quarter. This one, we all know what's going to happen here. This is our upper lip. This should be reviewed to you, but we're going to slowly pinch this out to try to make this good enough for my upper lip. Don't want to make it too thin. Want to stretch it out at least double the length of a quarter, at least. And we don't want to make it too wide this way. We want to make it long. And more importantly, as always, we want to keep the thickness relatively even. So if you have a part that feels a little bit lumpy or sticking out, try to keep that all the same thickness. And I'm going to continue to sort of pinch that out. And see, looks a little short. I'm going to squeeze this out just a little bit thinner. Make it just a little bit longer. Starting to get there. Starting to get there. You can kind of see what's going on with the mouth. Almost there. Getting there. A little bit more. And if you're having a tough time making this long enough, you can always add a little bit more clay or use a slightly bigger ball. But as you can see, I've sort of pushed mine out and pinched mine out so that it goes from edge to edge over here and covers up the top lid. Now, before I place this down, I gotta form it just like I formed the last mouth. Let's give myself a little more space over here. And take my, what's going to be my upper lip. I want to look for the center, the middle of it, and then with my fingers I kind of want to just press in a little bit. I want to create that little bump in the center, so nice and round, so it starts to get that little bump in the middle. You want to make sure you center that. You start off like me where it's a little bit off center. Work to try to make sure that little bump's in the middle. This is the middle of your lip. By pressing in a little bit with your fingers, it creates the contour for the upper lip. Just like we did before, we want to kind of make sure all this is kind of nice looking and rounded before we attach it, because ultimately we're not going to be able to mess with this too much once it's on the face. So I'm going to go ahead and play with that a little bit more until I get it just the way I want. Before we split the lip with the toothpick, again, I'm going to kind of create an indent right in there. Use my fingertip to kind of smooth that out. This is exactly the same way as you made it before. I want to get rid of any imperfections now before I add it to my face. Not really crazy about how I did this at the bottom here, so I'm going to just smush that out and smooth it out a little bit. Try to get it just right before I add it to it. I really don't want to add this upper lip until it's the way I like it. So you can see I've got my pinched lip. You guys who've done the mouth already, this should all just be a review for you. I've created that split. And now what I want to do is I kind of want to place it on my open mouth. See, I've got my teeth. You can kind of adjust it where you want to show it. You don't have to show a ton of teeth, especially on the top. All right, we can take this now. We can kind of rough fit it. Just kind of press it in so it fits. We are only blending this little section over here. But we don't want to get rid of the full split over here. We want a little bit of overlap, a little bit of overlap. Now listen, this is the longest demo I've done, but we've been at this for a couple weeks now, and hey listen, you guys who've been submitting the work is show me you're up to the challenge. The mouths that look good, I want you to make sure you get the hang of making the mouth so that we can then make the open mouth. And in all honesty, voila, here we go. We got some teeth, we got a guy speaking out to you. Everybody's could be a little bit different in shape. You've got chins that you can reform. No need to go for thousands of dollars of plastic surgery when you could just mush the clay around. And there you go. How do you do? All right.